Here on the ground, change happens fast. Problems feel frequent and urgent. It's loud and anxiety runs high. From a satellite view, the Earth looks the same as it did thousands of years ago. We've been here before. Let's learn from our past and shoot for a better future.
Tried these failed policies before, and we are not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back. That's right.
We're not going back. Some organic energy there. That was, I believe, Tuesday evening. Kamala Harris in Atlanta. Welcome to this episode of A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mikkelson, your host, speaking at you from Sunday, August 4th, 2024, in the space and time continuum. After last week, of course, the tides have turned pretty hugely. I was kind of, I told you, it feels like I don't need to try and make you feel better anymore. Like so many people say, listening to your podcast makes me feel better about all the chaos. Everything turned into a very, my friend, and he gave me permission to use his name, my friend Doug. Doug, the guy that I've talked about a lot here, he's basically almost becoming a associate producer. He will give me an outlook on the concern that I think a lot of people share. And I use that in figuring out exactly what I'm going to say on this show. And after last week, I felt like, what am I going to say on this show? It's almost like when the problem gets solved, then what do you have to talk about? I remember, writing songs. I used to feel like you need to dig into a problem. You need to be lonely. Otherwise, you can't write a good song. You can't write a love song unless there's something wrong going on that you're writing about. It feels like the world was upside down for a long time, and it just got turned back right side up. And as Doug, he and I were talking on the phone the other day, and he said it's at least turning in that direction. Well, even more things happened this week. For instance, I talk about the keys to the White House. One of them talks about foreign policy and foreign affairs. That one was kind of up in the air. We don't know if something's going to change hurting the Democrats or helping the Democrats. Well, this huge exchange of prisoners with Russia, Alan Lichtman, the author, the inventor of the 13 Keys, he said he can't determine yet whether it's going to affect that. I feel like it is, and then, of course, Trump is like, I would have made a better deal. I would have got everything back, all those people back without giving anything to Russia. Well, then why didn't you do it when you were president? Something Joe Biden said when he was asked. Donald Trump says, blah, 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 blah. What do you say about that? Biden just looked at the reporter and said, why didn't he do it when he was president? The other thing is Donald Trump keeps talking about we need to get rid of NATO and stuff like that. It's the alliances that we had and Biden's skill and experience in handling our alliances that made this deal happen. He got the German chancellor to do something that Donald Trump would have never been able to do. And that's what tipped the final scale. And that's not a good way, the final scale. It's finally what tipped the scale and made this deal happen. I'm not going to go through tons of details about that, all the prisoners that we got back. These are things that I'm sure you've heard. And I'm trying to kind of dig into things that perhaps you haven't been exposed to, like how that could change the 13 keys and give Kamala Harris an even better chance of winning the White House. Certainly not going to hurt. Certainly did not tip in the wrong direction. Now, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 months as far as foreign affairs goes, but this was an unexpected, this is the other thing I want to talk about. He was also asked, Biden was also asked about another prisoner that's still in Russia. And Biden said, we're not giving up on that. This, by the way, is when he's going to the helicopter outside of the White House. He's not even looking old here. He's not sounding old. I know I would have a lot of trouble hearing the reporters, especially over the sound of the helicopter, when they're yelling at you, yelling questions. Well, he didn't. Anyway, that aside, Biden said, we're not giving up on that and more prisoners. And then they said, what more can be done? And then he stopped himself again and he turned around and said, you want me to tell you everything now so that they don't get released? A big part of this game is shut the hell up. Nobody knew this was going on. It was going on for years, actually. There's even reporting President Biden about an hour before he notified the world that he was dropping out of the presidential race on July 21st, called the Prime Minister of Slovenia, whose country was contributing 2 convicted Russian spies to the swap to secure the pardon necessary for the deal to proceed. CIA Director William Burns traveled to Turkey last week to meet his counterpart there and finalize the logistics for the swap. You think this kind of nuance, complicated stuff going on is something Trump could have done? No. Or the Trump administration? No. These people wouldn't even meet with Trump's CIA director because Trump's an idiot. That's why he didn't bring back anybody. He didn't bring anybody back. Some of these people that were brought back by Biden were there when Trump was president. Peter Whelan, Trump could have got him back, didn't even try. Actually, Trump probably couldn't have gotten him back. But he didn't even try, much less if he would have tried, would he have been successful? So the ins and outs of this, you don't go talking about, you don't say, oh, my CIA director just met with this guy because we're doing this deal and blah, blah, blah. No, you got to keep your mouth shut. You can't go bragging about what's going on or the deal can't get made. Now, you've heard me talk about Kevin Roberts. He is, I'm writing his name down if you hear me in the background. He is the president of the Heritage Foundation and one of the main authors of Project 2025. Now, he is an arrogant, and everyone says, oh, he's super smart. I'm sorry. I don't see that because he's so arrogant, he's got to brag about this. The Project 2025 thing got leaked big time weeks and weeks ago now, so everybody's talking about it. And what ended up happening? The whole hierarchy had to disband because their secret got out. And now Kevin Roberts is saying things like, there are things going on that the other side doesn't even know about, and we're not going to tell them. Okay. So then the other side looks into it. And we're finding out about all of these, basically the same thing as the fake electors. These are Trump election deniers, you can call them that, I guess, that got themselves into positions where, in separate counties, where their job is to certify the vote count in that county. That's how it works. And that's a ceremonial type of thing. It's not their job to determine who won the vote count. That's the vote count itself determines who won the vote count. Their job is to verify it. Well, thanks to Kevin Roberts, unable to keep his mouth shut because he likes to brag about how smart he is, which just, of course, you've heard me say it before. The guy who thinks he's the smartest guy in the room is the dumbest guy in the room, and that is Kevin Roberts. So he can't keep his mouth shut, so the other side, us, we look into it and we're like, oh, this could be what he's talking about. And we're going to keep looking and we might find other stuff that he's working on to cheat. Because that's the only way the Republicans can stay in power, is cheating. In fact, every president since Eisenhower, who is a Republican president, cheated to get into the White House, starting with Nixon and then every single one. We're going to talk a little bit about one of those because there's another big piece of news that came out this week. But just to finish up here, This is something that we need to really be diligent about. We really need to be watching these people in these counties. They can delay things past election day. They can mess things up. So now we're getting ready because Kevin Roberts said, oh, we're not going to tell them what else we're doing. And we were like, oh, well, here's something you didn't tell us that we just found because you tipped us off that we should be looking. And secretaries of state can get to those people and say, listen, there's going to be a big lawsuit against you personally if you don't do your job of certifying the votes in this county. That is your job. You did not get put into this position. Some of them are appointed, some of them are elected, local elections. You did not get put into this position to decide who won the vote. You got put into this position to be the final certification person, okay? That's your job. And if you don't do it, lawsuits will come raining down on you. We've already done that in 2022 and in 2020. Secretaries of state and sometimes even like county commissioners and different people who are above these people basically just come in and intimidate. They don't even intimidate. They just say, listen, man, this is your job, okay? Just shut up and do it. And of course, these people are very low level. And if they're true election deniers, true believers, they're also really dumb and can be easily, pressured into doing their job. And that's going to be the job of secretaries of state and different people in these different places where this might happen. Thank you, Kevin Roberts, for tipping us off. We only have a few minutes left here, but I do want to point out another story, and this one's going to require us to go back in time. 1992. George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan were facing the possibility of treason charges. Who did they call? Bill Barr. Bill Barr was the Attorney General for George H.W. Bush. Christmas Day, 1992, the New York Times featured a screaming all-caps headline across the top of its front page. Attorney General Bill Barr had covered up evidence of crimes by Reagan and Bush in the Iran-Contra scandal. Earlier that week of Christmas, 1992 again, George H.W. Bush was on his way out of office. Bill Clinton had won the White House the month before, and in a few weeks would be sworn in as president. But Bush's biggest concern wasn't that he would leave the White House and have to go back to one of his 3 mansions, rather that he may end up embroiled even deeper in the Iran-Contra treason, and that he and his colleagues may face time in a federal prison after he left office. This story's complicated. I don't need to go into it that far. But later on in this investigating, we found out the Iran-Contra thing actually started in 1980 during that presidential campaign against Jimmy Carter. Treasonous collusion with the Iranians. President Bani Sadr of Iran told the Christian Science Monitor in 2013, Ayatollah Khomeini and Ronald Reagan had organized a clandestine negotiation, later known as the October Surprise, which prevented the attempts by myself, the president of Iran, and then U.S. President Jimmy Carter to free the hostages before the 1980 U.S. presidential election. Again, similar to Nixon thwarting the end of the war in Vietnam in order to get elected. Reagan did the exact same thing, and George H.W. Bush was in the meeting in Iran, making the deal to no, do not free the hostages. Whole long story. They were American hostages in Iran for more than a year. Big story of the Jimmy Carter administration times. Jimmy Carter had made a deal for them to be freed in the summer of 1980. And the Reagan people got to work, made a deal with Khomeini, who was not the president of Iran. He was the guy who was taking over Iran and basically took these hostages. Again, Iran was like the United States basically in the 1970s. You know, women were wearing cool clothes. I mean, they didn't have to cover everything up. Their culture was almost similar to the United States. And then Ayatollah Khomeini took over. And it started with taking American hostages And Jimmy Carter made a deal. The Reagan people instead went to Ayatollah Khomeini and said, do not release the hostages under Jimmy Carter. We'll give you a better deal. We will make sure that you have arms. Illegal. We will give you weapons. That is illegal. That is treason. The Iran-Contra, it's very complicated even as to why it's called that. There was also another thing called Iraq-gate that George H.W. Bush was caught up in later on. So both Ronald Reagan and his vice president should have went to prison just like Nixon, but Bill Barr stepped in, pardoned some people so that they wouldn't testify. He made his own complex deal to thwart anybody, really, from being convicted of anything having to do with the Iran-Contra. Now we're finding out that Bill Barr also covered up, and it came out just this week. September 2016, Republicans were trying to get Donald Trump to write a check to his campaign because his campaign had no money. Donald Trump said he was going to self-fund, which he didn't. He still had big donors and everything, lying, of course. Well, all of a sudden, Donald Trump in October then writes a check for $10 million to his own campaign. Just a couple weeks before that, $10 million was taken out of the National Bank of Egypt, almost all of their American currency. $10 million packed into 2 bags, $100 bills. Each bag weighed 100 pounds. Taken out, laundered. This was being investigated during the Mueller investigation. And if you remember the beginning of the Mueller investigation, we had one attorney general. He got fired, and then Bill Barr stepped in as Trump's attorney general. And Bill Barr made sure that Trump's bank account would not be investigated because the FBI was working on this. The FBI wanted to get Trump's bank account to see if the $10 million came from Egypt, put into his account. That was the cover-up. It's no longer covered up. We don't know for sure, but $10 million from Egypt. At the same time, Donald Trump writes a $10 million check to his campaign and insists that his first meeting as president would be with al-Sisi, the leader of Egypt, who is a dictator who took over in 2013 in a military coup. He killed many people and imprisoned many people. Basically what Donald Trump wants to do here. But he took over in a violent military coup d'etat in Egypt and has been ruling as a dictator ever since. And Trump insisted. He's a great guy. It's the first meeting, the first presidential meeting. I want to bring him into the Oval Office. So it's not just Russia, Russia, Russia. It's Egypt, Egypt, Egypt. The cheating that was put forth by Trump to get elected in 2016 is just so far over the top. Bill Barr is the sinister villain in America. One of the main sinister villains. Now, he is not part of the operations anymore. Now you got Kevin Roberts trying to be the sinister villain, but just ain't smart enough. Even Bill Barr is no longer taking part in any of this mess. He knows Donald Trump is a monster. All the brain power has left. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with all of this stuff and all of Trump's past crimes. Although we're finding out something I'll talk about when we come back. Again, I'm barely through my list here. So we'll come back and try and speed things up a little bit in the second half. You're listening to A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mikkelson. We'll be right back.
main stage. Because as the saying goes, if you got something to say, say it to my face.
Okay. It goes on and on. It goes on for another 30 seconds. About 60 seconds of the crowd being so loud that she couldn't even talk. Again, that's in Atlanta. About 10,000 people. It was a 10,000 person venue, full to the rafters. And the energy, you hear it there. You hear it. It's even cooler to see because you see the people. They're going nuts. The energy for Kamala Harris right now is insane. And people talk about, oh, it's just a honeymoon. Well, she's going to pick her vice president at any moment now before apparently Tuesday, where she has an event. She plans on having her vice presidential pick along with her in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania or something. And then the following week or something like that, within 2 weeks, is the convention. Her convention. So the honeymoon's going to get stretched and stretched and stretched. And this crowd is going to be there still. I mean, it's nuts. The amount, there are all these separate groups forming. You've heard about these Zoom calls with all these separate groups. And then some people are saying, well, is that because there's division and all these different groups, they disagree with each other, but they are all, no, they agree with each other. Somebody put it as, this is the Dems getting in formation. They're falling into formation for this election, which is less than 3 months to go. Wow. I think the honeymoon is going to surpass Election Day. The inauguration day is going to be insane. We don't know what the Republicans are going to try and do. They're going to try and cheat, but it's looking like we're going to deliver such an overwhelming landslide that nothing's going to work for them, you know? I mean, it's insane to watch what's going on. Now, in this exact same venue, just last night, Trump was there. And I swear to God, there's a clip of him saying, why didn't they let people in? They let more people into Kamala, but even though they all left as she was speaking because it was so boring. This was very close to the end of her speech. Did you hear anybody leaving? Did you hear it being boring? Did you hear people being bored? And Trump is like, why did they not let more of our people in? They moved all of the people outside way away from the building because we've got beautiful cameras out there for them, but there's nobody there because they moved them away from the building. And I see a whole bunch of empty seats up there. Why didn't they let the people in? They could let more people. It looks like there's probably 1,000 more we could get in here. In the exact same venue. Trump is pointing out all the empty seats and blaming it on the college where the venue is. I can't remember what Georgia University or something. He's putting down the college. He's putting down the very popular governor. He's losing votes and momentum. And we're hearing here, Kamala is gaining votes and momentum. There was some polling, you know how I feel about polling, but basically if Kamala's tied with Donald Trump in a poll, that means she's 5 to 10 points ahead. That's how I read it. When Joe Biden was behind by 4 points in a lot of places, he was ahead probably by 2 or 7 points. These polls, they don't include Gen Z. These polls are always going to lean more toward the Democrats, and that's what we've been seeing consistently. That's why we say the Democrats have been, quote, overperforming. It's because the polls are expecting them to lose by 5 points, and instead they win by 5 points in the actual election, whatever election it is. All these special elections, the 2022 midterms, all of this stuff. That's what we've been seeing now for years and years. These polls, basically, you can pump them up anywhere from 5 to 10 points in the favor of the Democrats. But still, the polls are the polls, right? Now, she's either even or ahead in all 7 states of the battleground states, which means she's far ahead. And I believe this is going to be a huge landslide. I've been saying Joe Biden would win by 10 million votes. He still would. He still would. I think Kamala, though, is picking up more. The voting enthusiasm in 2020 was at 60% in some poll. That same poll, it was down to 55% before Kamala got in. And then it was taken about a week after Kamala was in, and it's up to 62% enthusiasm, people saying, I'm definitely going to vote. All right, so that tells me, and whenever more people vote, again, that also leans toward the Democratic Party. Kamala, 12 to 15 million vote victory. Overwhelming electoral college, possibly winning places like Ohio, North Carolina, Florida. I don't know. It's looking crazy, man. It's looking crazy. And what are the Republicans doing? By the way, I was going to tell you, I hate it when I tell you I'm going to come back and tell you something and then I forget. Trump's legal woes. Before we go into this next fun part, Trump's legal woes, okay? Judge Chutkan is back in charge. Lisa Rubin, very knowledgeable in all of these things, and she digs in deep. I'm reading from her Twitter. Tanya Chutkan did not come to play. And even as her case was stayed, she was getting ready. Case in point, her 16-page decision issued last night, Saturday night, rejecting Trump's motion to dismiss for selective and vindictive prosecution. Trump had all of these. So now that's what she wrote. Now I'm talking as myself. Trump had all of these many challenges to the Judge Chutkan in Washington, D.C., obstruction of the 2020 election case. One of his 4 big indictment cases. Judge Chutkan wasn't sitting on her hands. She was working, including on a Saturday night. Lisa Rubin goes through and details a lot of this stuff. It's a lot of legalese kind of writing. Trump's lawyers are just throwing everything they can at the wall. She goes on that Judge Chutkan similarly concludes that a statement Biden made in November 2022, signaling nothing but his intent to vigorously campaign against Trump. So this is a thing where Trump's saying Biden was doing something he wasn't doing. Judge Chutkan covers that. She covers all of these little things. She further explains why Trump cannot establish the even more demanding test for vindictive prosecution, which requires proof that the government actually or likely punished the defendant for asserting his legal rights. Another argument Trump's trying to make. Finally, she denies his request for an evidentiary hearing to show the government is lying about his investigation. But to get more fact-finding, Trump would have to have shown her at least some evidence tending to show that. Instead, she concludes, he offered no meaningful evidence, nor any persuasive explanation as to how further fact-finding would help him establish the necessary elements of a selective prosecution claim. So now, the parties move toward their August 9th deadline for a joint status report with both of Trump's remaining motions to dismiss resolved within a day of the case resuming. Fin. F-I-N. Finette. Finished. Judge Chutkan shut down a possible weeks-long BS attack within 24 hours of regaining the case. That's what I was going to tell you about. These things are still going on. All these prosecutions of Trump are still going on. Now, nothing conclusive is probably going to happen before Election Day, but after Election Day, he is not going to be president. He is going to be going to court. By the way, he has to show up in court for some of this stuff, and a lot of information is going to come out before the election about what Trump tried to do to subvert the 2020 election. I want to play for you something here that is pretty crazy. I'm getting it from the Kyle Kaczynski show. His show is called Secular Talk. I don't agree with everything he says, but you can hear him every once in a while. The reason I'm telling you my source here is because you can hear Kyle Kaczynski on his own show as he's playing this clip, kind of reacting to it a little bit here and there, laughing at it and things like that. This is people scrambling to figure out how Trump can run against Kamala Harris. Charlie Kirk, he's the leader of some right-wing thing. He thinks he's the king of the young Republicans. Here's his idea.
President Trump then zeroed in on a very, very effective attack vector against Kamala Harris.
Attack vector. A very serious attack vector. Very self-important.
You're a sixth grade teacher, and a kid begins to identify as Steve instead of Susie. As a sixth grade teacher in Huntington Beach, California, you are not allowed to call up the parent. You are not allowed to notify the parent.
Okay, I'm not going to let him go through the whole thing because he's so, long-winded. But I want to get to the conclusion of what he thinks Trump should say Kamala Harris is going to do.
Parents are no longer even allowed to know that their kids are being called by different names, receiving medical treatments. Kamala Harris is in favor of this. Kamala Harris and her gang of California radicals and mobsters have been pushing for the state to have more power than parents. President Trump exploited this and attacked it. And every Christian in the country, you better understand that if Kamala Harris becomes president, she will nationalize this California law and make it so that the state can kidnap your child under trans-related issues. Kamala Harris seeks to kidnap your child via the trans agenda.
Okay, you could hear Kyle Kaczynski losing his mind over that. Kamala Harris will kidnap your child and force them to become transgender. This is so, can you hear the desperation? Very creative, I guess, but yeah, let's have that be our slogan. Let's have that be our bumper sticker. Kamala Harris will kidnap your child. Great job. Trump isn't listening. Trump is saying, I don't know, she was always an Indian, and now she wants to be a black person. She wants to be a black person. You have to watch in its entirety. It is only about 35 minutes long. You can find it easily. The NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists, sure you've heard about this. Trump showed up. I don't know whose idea was it for him to show up. But ABC's Rachel Scott did a great job of asking him questions and not holding back. Telling him his own words. You have treated black, especially women, in this manner. So why should black people vote for you? And he doesn't answer the question. You got to watch the whole thing. And this is where do you think Kamala Harris was a DEI hire? And he goes, explain to me what DEI is. And she goes, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, you got to define it. You got to define it. She goes, that is literally the words. You got to define it for me. Either he has no idea what it is or he wants her, I don't know, he thinks he's going to make a fool out of her. She's clearly got 60 times more brain power than he does. Anyway, that's what ended up making him say, I don't know. She was always an Indian. I didn't even know she was black. That's now what everybody's memo is. All week, Republicans have been going on TV asking if they believe that, if they think that's something Trump should go with. And they'd say, yeah, it's true, right? She was an Indian and now she's black. Why is she only turning black now? Okay, she's biracial. Her father's black. Her mother's from India. And she's always said that. I've always known that. You've always known that ever since we've known Kamala Harris. I've known it for many years. Maybe more people just found out more recently when she became vice president. I don't know. But now this is what the Republicans are going with. And then, so of course, I played you the part where she said, show up at debate day. Say it to my face, Donald. And he's saying, I can't show up at that one, but now you have to show up at a different one on Fox News, and it's going to have a big rally crowd. We're going to do everything the way I want to do it. Don can't tell the black lady what to do, okay? And I think Kamala's finally, and by the way, I think Rachel Scott did a pretty good job of standing up for herself against this bloviating piece of crap. Horrible. Ugh. And again, in that, just this week, he repeated the black jobs thing. Wasn't that enough of a catastrophe for him before? So now Simone Biles, who's right now being a huge hero, gold medal winner in the Olympics, she wins a gold medal, and then she tweets out, holding her gold medal, she writes, I love my black job. Yeah. He can't help himself. He cannot help himself. It's amazing. He is just absolutely crumbling. He's turning into a puddle of sort of a feces mixed liquid puddle. Sorry to be so gross, but he started. He's the one is that, right? Anyway, when he's asked if the VP, how do you feel about your pick? Do you think JP, what's his name? JD Vance. Now I'm being like Trump. My JP Morgan, my vice president. JD Vance, again, Rachel Scott asked, or one of the moderators asked, is JD Scott Vance, is JD Vance ready to be president on day one? Trump says, it doesn't matter who the VP pick is. It doesn't matter. So, of course, is that what he's going to say? Because Kamala is going to make her VP pick any moment now. Is he going to say, it doesn't really matter. I don't care who her VP is. No, he's going to have some sort of attack. I don't know what. I can't even. At this point, I can't even predict what it might be. How would he go after Tim Walz if he's the VP pick? Last week, I said I predicted, and I had a strong feeling it was going to end up being a Minnesota governor, Tim Walz. I still think there's a really, 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 really good chance. I still think he's going to be the guy, but a lot of people are really talking about Shapiro for BS reasons, I believe. Because Trump is kind of right. Your VP pick, they don't necessarily win the state they're in. That's not really how it's worked for a very, very long time. So people are thinking that she has to pick Shapiro because he's the governor of Pennsylvania. He's very popular. He will help her win the state of Pennsylvania. I'm telling you, she's going to win the state of Pennsylvania anyway. And I think Tim Walz can help her win any state just as well as any of the other picks. Now, I will also say, any of the guys who are in the final running here, I think are great. We've got a great pool to choose from. Pretty much everybody who's anybody is saying, no matter who she picks, we're still going to stay behind her and keep growing this coalition. So the honeymoon's going to go beyond Election Day. On this show, we're going to keep the organic energy going, help keep each other sane in this chaotic time. But man, it sure feels like the chaos is lifting. Feels like we're going to be able to retake control and make the world a more sane place. But until then, we'll stick together on this show, help each other feel sane, and I'll try and find things that I think maybe did not make it onto your radar screen because you're living your life, and I'm kind of crazy digging into this stuff. I do it so you don't have to, the old saying anyway. So, thank you so much for listening. We'll speak at you again next week.
You've been listening to A Satellite View with Todd Mikkelson. Go to toddmikkelson.com for links and more information.